All right, thank you very much, Randy. Hey, good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here today. Uh, One of the biggest pieces of feedback we got in developing this roadmap is we need to communicate more, we need to communicate better on what the status of programs are and projects, and keep moving forward with people being aware. To help do this, a couple things happened in the last roadmap, and that was the establishment of the roadmap ambassadors, which are the local focal points. And we've just had to tag up with many of those this past a couple of weeks, again, trying to do quarterly updates for them to be aware and help answer your questions, but then also offer you a presentation of what's happening from the regional perspective, open to everybody to see what's happening. So here we go. What I'm going to talk about today is all on the CR intranet. I'm working right off those pages right here. You can see I'm on from the home page. I click the roadmap tab, and roadmap tab gives me the options to go forward, and I'm going to look at roadmap 22. I'll head back a second here. On the other pages back there, you can see we still have our Blue Sky resources. We have our roadmap ambassadors resource pages, past AOP goals management, and the archive of the previous roadmaps. So moving forward to the 22 roadmap, what we've got going on here, the web page that supports that. Again, what happened new this year was a glossary of roadmap key terms. Again, if you're not sure what definitions of the roadmap mean, this is a place to go. We also have our recording for the webinar on November 17th when we did our original overview and kickoff Q&A session. And after this meeting is done, we'll post this up on the website also. I've got a few other things I'm going to talk about posting on the same website also coming up. But the real measure of our roadmap right now is what's being done in the AOP. And for fiscal year 22, we have our goals from the roadmap, not one for one, but very closely matched up with our AOP. And that was part of one of the things we were experimenting with the roadmap. Like everything else, we're trying to evolve how we communicate and how we move forward with the roadmap. So it won't be the exact same as next version coming up either. We're going to keep on trying to evolve. But here's what I want to talk about is the success of the roadmaps. As Randy had mentioned, we've got some good things to show for it. One of the greatest highlights that came out of our last roadmap was the establishment of backups at the WFOs supporting and around our CWSUs to have people cross-trained and create some new opportunities. Well, that has been a success story that has been absolutely fabulous. And it's paid back in dividends in ways we didn't even see happening. I'd like to call out in the Olathe, Kansas City CWSU had the support of both Topeka and Pleasant Hill to provide cross-trained forecasters. As they went through short staffing situations, they were able to get the support they needed. We haven't quite seen it totally develop into all that blue sky opportunity for learning and for cross-training that we hoped it would be. It's happening. But the big story that came out of this one is their support is there. And in fact, it happened so much so that when one of the other CWSUs had a short staffing situation, ZKC, the CWSU in Olathe, was able to send support to that CWSU in a short staffing situation. So we see things happening that are empowering us beyond what we originally wrote into the roadmap there. But again, a success story, a success story that we can talk about. Other ones that we've talked about is, this mutual aid that we mentioned and the whole region concept is starting to take shape in different forms. And a success story there is one of our forecast offices had a generator issue and severe weather's bearing down onto their office. And the concern is the standard service backup offices right around it would have the concern of being under the same weather that the office that has the generator issue. And one of the things we did is look forward and go, how do we make mutual aid work differently outside the normal structure of our service backup? So we trained up another office who was not in the same system, off to the side, not a normal service backup location, and got them configured to test the concepts of how might mutual aid work. Now, it's a lot of testing. It's not always, here's the explicit result like we saw from the CWSU. It's evolving, it's testing, it's working issues. And I'll talk more about that when I look at this year's goals. But the success of going forward, again, is incremental improvement. It's not suddenly we're here and we're done. the question is, we don't feel like we've completed everything from roadmap version 2. Well, that's actually not a bad thing because it's evolving. Where are you at? Have you self-evaluated? Keep working on it, but you've also got the offices around you to help support you, lessons learned, and that's part of the role of the roadmap ambassadors is when there's things that aren't working, is working with the offices around you, working with the roadmap ambassadors, working with the management teams and the local management teams to keep moving forward, because it's not about, again, this quantum check block. It's about moving the initiative forward, and the end, as they say, is never completely done. So with that in mind, I'm going to look at this year and we're going to talk about where we are in the AOP. But before I do that, any general questions out there? Anything coming in yet, Randy, on the for the roadmap in general?
Nothing yet, Scott.
Okay. So I'm scrolling down here and you can see the 22 AOP goal tracker here. You also see below that the roadmap feedback form. Again, this is open to everybody all the time. You've got concerns on the AOP or on the roadmap and want an update. Again, your roadmap ambassador's there and this form is there. But up here on the tracking chart, you can click the upper right-hand corner and open the spreadsheet, which will open you up to this. And in looking at the roadmap of the AOP itself, again, not all goals we're going to find out are matched to the roadmap. And I'm not going to talk about every goal on here. I'm going to highlight things because the information is there. So here's what we've done to try to help people understand and see what's happening with the roadmap. Besides communicating it quarterly, you can look in and see what's happening on literally a day-to-day basis. And it starts off again tying what our goals are. And our goals here, I'll reorder them from 1 to 37 when we get to the end of the brief. But for doing this brief today, I've sorted them into a completion status so people can see exactly where we're at more quickly with the completions. But we identify what portfolio, what roadmap goal is there. And you'll see a few of them that aren't specifically in our roadmap. They're central processing or AFS goals that are being completed. And some of those things that aren't in our roadmap are actually labeled under our themes, under the ASD, Administrative Services Division, of goals we're trying to accomplish. But for the most part, when you look at the roadmap theme and you look at the focus area, we're matching 1 for 1 for the goals in the roadmap. So here's our best way to track it going forward. Again, who's the lead organization? Who is the task lead? Pretty clear. What the milestone is. Now, the milestone of the AOP is written in AOP language. It's not necessarily exact verbiage right out of the roadmap, but they do match up and the goals are working as collateral. So we're just, again, be aware it's not a 1 for 1 word match. You'll next see, and I should probably expand that a little bit, we have our goal dates, the quarterly goals, and we have them by what quarter things are being complete. If you look down here on line 4, the second item, you can see a couple of checks there that are highlighted in yellow that we're moving the goal from what we thought might be a first quarter goal to a third quarter goal. And I'll explain that here in a little more detail. But I want to talk about these first things that we're showing as complete in March. And I want to explain kind of the process that goes there. And one of them is that we keep monthly notes. We're working on notes to keep people aware of what the progress is, that it's just not arbitrarily happening at the end of the year and a check is being blocked because we think it's complete. We want you to be aware of what's happening in the interim steps going forward. But now on these items, these first items here that are marked complete in March, there are some things to understand. I'll look down here specifically on the line 7, item number 20 here, our goal number 20, and you can see that it was about collaborating with the CLO, and it was working with the CLO and all the other regions to create that national platform to share operational relevant training, like our guest speaker series. And CLO has updated their Google site. They have a couple of calendars now where they're matching everything. You'll see a lot of that information now being advertised on the 9/15 presentations. We also have it in upcoming training webinar, and for webinars and training, that's a calendar on our internet site also. So CLO is supporting it. All the regions are supporting it. We've got a goal completed. That is one of those ones we get to say, hey, we've done this and people are participating. Right above that, you can see we had another goal, Andy Just, Complete Forecaster Builder version 10. That was completed back in November. It's out there. Again, looking at those improvements. So that task for Central Region for the year within our sphere of control was complete. Now, the moving forward, again, it's not that we're done with Forecast Builder. We're done with that specific task to move Forecast Builder forward. Going back to the top of the page, Central Region IDSS Builder 2.0 implementation. Again, implementation is not possible in a 100% capacity from the goal we wrote. We wrote the goal that we wanted the style guide out there. Well, we've hit a point where we can't do anything else with a style guide. We've done our preparation where we've implemented the templates that are going to be part of the style guide. But the style guide itself is now being set to be released in October after our fiscal year, after our date. But again, out of our scope, out of our sphere of control, we can't change that fact. But we've completed what we're able to. Now, will we add and continue to do this as a goal for next year? That one will probably be less likely to be one of our specific goals because we're looking at the hopefully finalized style guide, just waiting to be released in October by the time September comes. That's not so true when I look at this next item behind it on line 4 and AOP goal number 15. And that was to establish a process to use the WSSI, Winter Storm Severity Index, to improve inter-office collaboration on winter weather headlines. Well, it turns out there was a plan. There was a process that was put in place and it was tested this summer. Or not this summer, excuse me, this past winter. And it shows that the participation found that it was really unsuitable because we were using NDFD, which was post-process, to try to do forecast, and it just wasn't quite the process that we wanted to come out with. So the goal now is what's our plan for next winter? What are we going to be testing next winter? So we've completed the first round, and we found out it is, to use the terminology from our previous roadmap, it's accepting and not being having a fear of failure, because it's not a failure. It's a way of going, here's what we tried. It didn't turn out the way we want it. We're going to reattack it, and this will probably reappear in a goal for next year. That how do we go to the next phase when we found out something didn't work right? So we accept the fact that things don't always turn out specifically as we plan, but we need to be able to continue and adapt moving forward. The other thing was the routine collaboration here on line 5, goal 18 complete. Again, great job by STI doing collaboration with SPC and Central Region and have regular meetings set up. It's helping with the collaborative effort across the board. But I want to pause here and go, these are the things we're looking at as complete. And as you can see, they're not complete necessarily as written. They're complete in the extent that Central Region can do them within its sphere of control or within the lessons learned. And in the case of WSSI, it's what do we come up with to test for the next year? How do we establish a new process that hopefully will work better? So I'm going to pause here and say, any questions, any thoughts that have come in from the field at this point, Randy? Anybody?
Not at this time, Scott. And I would just like to encourage anyone as Scott's going through his material and the discussion if you have any questions or things you'd like to clarify, just type them into the questions pane or send a chat, and then we can pass them on. One thing I'll ask Scott for curiosity is when we go through the process of developing the roadmap, there's so many ideas, there's so many great suggestions that come from field input. Do you guys go through a process and try to have a certain number of goals per who's going to lead it, ISD or STI, so that we don't put too many in one segment and not enough in another? How does that process go? Is it just kind of a very natural breakpoints that you identify?
Well, again, the input process, and again, it'll be a little bit different this year. We're really just starting that, but is to screen them and to look for a balance. What is possible within the resources that we have? We don't want to overburden. One of the things we discovered from our last roadmap is we overburdened the culture team. The number of goals that they were addressed to handle was a little hard to overcome. So we looked at how do we distribute, how do we make things equal, how do we keep our 3 themes of enhancing consistency, strengthening culture, and the science-based service. How do we keep those things moving forward equally? So it's a great question. There's a lot of thought, and there is planning going in there not to overburden any particular group.
Okay, great. Thanks, Scott.
All right. I'm going to scroll down here, and you're going to see now things starting to look a little bit more in sequence here. And a lot of the goals we're looking at here are third and fourth quarter goals. You can see they're marked green. A couple things I do want to highlight here. I don't want to go through them line by line, but to kind of explain some of the things that are going in here. I'm going to look at line 10, goal number 3. It's not related specifically to our roadmap. It is linked to our central processing portfolio. And Brian Wallawander with the SFD, the division, is looking at how do we develop a plan to accomplish virtual oversight visits for IT security review. Well, they're reviewing checklists right now and best practices, and this is an effort not just done with inside the division, but working with ITOs, working with folks in the field to get their input on what's the relevant information we need to be asking to do this virtually, and how do we go forward. The goal is to get this done in third quarter. Again, something to help and enhance the economics of doing the IT security reviews, and again, just reviewing the material. It's a goal that will, again, impact the region in our sphere of control, and again, identifies that it's not one single part, it's not just operations, it's also support services, and in that manner, addressing goals for the region. 2 lines down on line 12, goal number 5, it's an AFS goal. Julie McElroy's got the lead on that right now. It's developing how to accomplish oversight visits using a hybrid approach to review, to do the virtual reviews with in-person sub-regional ASA meetings. Again, right out of the roadmap, something that we've tried to talk about is how do we do things that will enhance the culture. Again, we don't want to do everything virtual. We have to have people meeting. We have to have that interaction. We have to have that in-person part of it, but it's not specifically related to a goal in the roadmap. But moving forward, they're beginning their development of an initial plan. The question is, will they be able to execute anything in FY22? And again, that depends a lot on staffing right now for them, and also on the finances that we do happen to come in. Again, finances, the budget was just released, but that hasn't trickled down through the weather service to the region yet. So we're still waiting for to figure out where our allotments lie. But again, moving forward, going on a green pace. Right below that on line 13 and goal 6, I just want to give this update to you because this one is about addressing our 2020 OHI data. People put a lot of time and effort. As a matter of fact, Central Region put more time and effort into doing completed surveys so offices could get OHI data and get back to them. And for the most part, all offices are working forward on this. There's 1 or 2 cases where we've got some things we're working on, but I'm personally calling all of the office managers and talking to them about this goal. I'll probably complete that sometime here in the next couple of weeks to make sure every office is reached out to. And at the same time, the Central Region Culture Team has held a series of town hall meetings, trying to get some of the information of what's going on with the reintegration piece. How does this meet? How do we come out of COVID and make this work? Not only the OHI data, but the COVID impacts on the office. So moving forward, it's not that nothing's happening on here. It's hopefully happening in your office with your culture team leads and your management teams. And from the regional perspective, we're there trying to provide resources, as is the Central Region Culture Team. So not high visibility, but actions been happening for months on this, again, office to office level. Oh, let's see here. I'm going to jump down. I do want to point out that actually right below that, goal 7. And what I really want to point on this one is the task lead for enabling greater D&I, diversity and inclusion, continuity and consistency across the region involves our diversity program managers, our local office diversity program managers, and their goal to update resources for management and for the program managers inside the offices. One of the things you'll see so far is they're trying to resort the data that's out there and available. If you visit the diversity website on our internet, you'll see it's been greatly improved. We're trying to set up better resources. They're doing a fantastic job of trying to manage the data and make it more friendly. And oh, by the way, the other part that comes into this, if you haven't heard the new terminology of diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility, we're trying to move from what was the common term last year, D&I, into the new terminology of the DEI and A. So again, things change. Even though we wrote a goal, the terminology's already changed on us, so we're moving forward. A couple more here. You can see Northern Plains MCHIT community is involved with trying to work on enhancements to blue sky opportunities. The Central Plains is working on creating some operational mutual aid and some administrative mutual aid criteria, trying to give some ideas from the field perspective back to the region so we can formalize that more. Again, work off the success of the RMA, the Remote Masso Analysis Program, and evolve other opportunities. So it's not just always Central Region has a responsibility to help execute, but we're calling on the field where we can, and we have groups in the field volunteering and stepping forward to tackle some of these goals and ensure that the field voice is heard. Going down here, there's some other ones here. I'm going to jump to line 21, item 16. Again, I've got Central Plains involved with this group, and it's again, how do we facilitate and enable collaborative innovation and from the field, so that when we have an idea in an office, it's not fully developed in the office necessarily. It's brought out and collaborated across offices more quickly in the process, sooner in the process, so we can embed the best of from across the region and have one tool that will serve many offices vice many tools that serve single offices. So we're working on how we can try to address that, moving forward on it slowly. Different thoughts and philosophies. We'll have to come up with what the best approach moving forward is. But when we get that goal complete, then we turn around and our next goal is to publish a communication plan on that. Get the information out, the policy, let people know how we're going to do innovation more collaboratively, where we allow and let people work, but we do it not in a single office mode, but in multi-office mode. So just again, right out of our roadmap goals moving forward, I just want to highlight that sometimes we have goals like 17 that rely on the completion of 16 before we can even start them. All right, moving down here, a lot of other green. You can see here on the evolving service-focused science, line 27, goal number 25. Randy and Bruce Smith here to create an inventory of opportunities for overall knowledge sharing and growth to support career growth. Okay, one of the things that's happening along with what Randy and Bruce are doing, is the Southeast Regional MIC community are starting to develop some tools and resources. And the Sioux communities and Element courses are being worked on by the Southeast community to try to find some of those resources. Again, this information will be supported and posted up to the Central Region Professional Development Internet Series, our internet site. The information's here. I don't know what everybody's interest is, but going through the rest of these probably isn't the best use of your time for the day, and over communicating is sometimes as bad as under communicating. So instead of boring you with all the details, I'm going to pause here and say, what questions do you have on any of the things we've covered, or any of the goals that are out there that you haven't heard about and would like to hear more details on?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, please ask questions about things that you'd like to hear updates on, or on anything that Scott's discussed to this point, as far as the process goes, or any of the individual milestones that we're talking about. I mean, it really is your roadmap. I mean, the majority of the things that are in the roadmap are field driven and come from ideas that you submit through the process that we go through to create the roadmap. And so while we're waiting for questions, Scott, I would ask you, like, at what point does a milestone go to yellow? How do you determine when you go from a green to a yellow?
Oh, great question, Randy. That is working with the task leads and discussing when do we start having concern. And part of it is to share that information, again, with the senior staff here, the regional director, but so we can address what resources or what things in our sphere of control are. So let me go back up to the top here for one moment and address the one that we talked about here, line 4, item 15, the winter storm severity index. Before we considered it complete and we marked it complete, it was yellow here earlier in the month. As we talked through the situation, it was, how do we deal with this? And it was, is it a red failure? And it was, no, it's not incomplete. We did establish a process. We tested it. It just turned out it wasn't the best process. Let's go back to the drawing board. Again, being open to the concept of not everything's going to work perfectly out. But we marked yellow, so we pay closer attention to it, and we bring it up in discussions amongst the senior staff. We bring it in amongst the task leads, and we talk about what the way forward is. So we do a monthly review on the status here. And if there's a question, we mark it yellow. And then we have the discussion, what's at risk? Are we going to be red at some point? Or do we realize that there's kind of a redirect that's needed, such as on the WSSI, to look at another approach, another process? And again, it's sometimes things just don't happen because they're out of our sphere of control. Other times, it's just a matter of timing and admitting that we can't get something complete, because failure is not what we're talking about here. We're making progress and we're evolving. We want to be honest and track in that regard, but marking things as yellow allows us to put the higher attention on it from a broader perspective of the region than just having the task lead carry that burden by themselves. Long answer, Randy, but I hope it answered the question.
You did, Scott. Thank you very much. Again, please take this opportunity to ask Scott questions about the roadmap or topics that you're interested in. Another one question I have, Scott, is I know that we like to align the roadmap under the umbrella of national goals, initiatives, right, from the national roadmap. So how do you strike the balance between staying within the national perspective, but also having some central region goals that may not be covered in the national roadmap? How is that balance struck?
Well, that's another good question, because everything we do truly is underneath the goals, the overviews. And if you look in our roadmap and you see the long list of resources, it fits somewhere under a strategic plan, or under the organizational health action plan, or perhaps under the diversity strategic plan from at the NOAA level. We have multiple resources there, and it's not always written in stone exactly what the goal is, but the outcome. And I'm going to use the word outcome. We're going to look at outcomes, and that's something we're going to think about more in our own roadmaps. What do we want the outcome to be, and what are our key results that we're going to measure going forward? So that's kind of what we're doing, is taking what the desired outcome is at the higher level, even if it is not explicit, and finding how do we support going in that direction with our efforts. But it's not a specific line item in a higher plan. So there is some work in that regard, and it's also taking the field input there on what we address, because the organizational health action plan itself has some goals, but the last version was very headquarters centric in perspective. So a lot of the input through our field teams on what was important for us to address with culture is what's carried into our roadmap. Again, in those cases, I think Central Region is ahead of the policy that's written there, if I can say it that way politely. We're helping drive things, and that shows with our relationships and the amount of support that we have with Office of Organizational Excellence, and with the number of folks we have doing lantern assignments and other support with them. Again, long answer. Hope that helped elaborate where we are and how we use higher level policy when we stay within it, but don't ignore what's happening in our own field offices.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great answer, Scott. And for those folks in the field, you may wonder, like, maybe you think the region moves, too slowly on certain things. You can be much more tactical at a local office than you can at the regional level, because we're talking about impacting potentially 45 different offices. And it's a much bigger step for national things to move forward. So we can be much more tactical and forward-leaning at Central Region and take the concepts that are presented in the vision documents and the reports that come out and actually try to start implementing some of those concepts much more quickly than maybe they can at the national level, because there's so much process involved. Is that a fair statement?
It's more than fair, and then I think one of the prime examples is where we are with collaborative forecast process. Is the agility of Central Region was able to take that concept much further than nationally at this point.
All right, perfect, Scott. I don't have any questions at this time.
Well, that is not a problem, because again, I want people to know a couple of things, and that is when they do have questions, the feedback form on the website, the roadmap ambassadors are there to ask them to do questions. You don't have to reach back to region to get an answer, but if you need to and you want to, feel free. This is about transparency. It's about allowing people to understand and responding to the feedback that we want to share information with you, and we know there's questions out there. But it's also a nice tie-in to where we're going with our next roadmap. We're trying to write the next roadmap, and we're just starting the process of collecting data right now. We will continue to do it like we did last year, which is we're going to collect information from all of our sub-regional management teams and our ESAs to make sure that we're hearing across all communities, hydro, MET, ET, we'll hear from the IT perspective. And again, we'll work with Jim Lee to get perspective from all staff members. And again, your roadmap ambassadors are there also getting input and hearing information as we're developing and getting the feedback from the field. But when we go forward on this one, we've got a couple of new documents that are out there. What's recently just been released, of course, is the NOAA 23 budget. The advances for the climate ready nation, the blue economy, and equity. Well, two of those, climate ready nation and equity, are two that we will probably address in our next roadmap. We will also likely look at, or we will look at, the recently released Department of Commerce strategic plan. Again, recent release has some information in there. When I look down and we look at some of the opportunities here, it's, again, addressing the climate crisis, mitigation, adaptation, and resilience efforts. Again, the equitable part and the moving forward, there's goals in here that we haven't even delved into completely. It's just recently been released, but we're going to be looking up at all these documents to see how do we tie them with our direction going forward. Moving forward, I do not see us changing our themes dramatically. Last year was a huge data call, a big change forward. The themes, I think, are established. They're definitely not invalid at this point. We'll keep going down those directions. It's what we look at under those same themes of future outcomes. What do we want to go forward? How do we want to take this and let people know what we're thinking is hopefully going to be where we are in 3, 4, 5 years in our roadmap, and what the key results for the next year are going to be to help us measure our success towards that. So in the beginning processes of the next roadmap, but there will be changes, and of course one of them is we reduced this current roadmap to about half the size of the previous one. I'd like to see us do that again, make it easier reading, make it less, less tedious to read. A lot of folks go, oh yeah, I do remember reading that back in November, but I'd forgotten it was even in the roadmap. So we're trying to make something that's going to be easier to review, easier for people to find information right up front. That is where we're going, and I have nothing really further to share other than to ask that people continue to use our ambassadors and use the feedback form to get more. And we'll schedule another quarterly update, probably, unfortunately, somewhere around late June timeframe, to give folks that third quarter update, so we can let people know where we're heading into fourth quarter. And we'll continue to also set up and work with our roadmap ambassadors to keep them up to date on anything that's changing. Information will be also forthcoming in the next month on more specifics on how we're moving forward in developing the next roadmap, which we're still looking to try to get published and out to the field by October 1st. If there's nothing else, Randy, I'm gonna give you back some time.